The 7th century IS was best known for two things: war and plague. A time when Chevali burned as the arch-lich at Waga ad Wakampi invaded, and a mad king slaughtered a generation of nobility, while in Sarradon the war in heaven grew increasingly bloody, with the rift between the ritualist and Wardenite faiths becoming wider by the day. These, coupled with a mysterious magical disease known as the Blood Blight, which devastated virtually the entire continent, proved to have dire consequences for everyone, from adversarian to martyr alike. Yet none of these events were more devastating to the future of the world than the discovery of self-replicating blood magic in Sarradon by the Sirod, a now extinct caste of magi who once lived and controlled magic in Sarradon from their various strongholds, chiefly the Sunken House, a magical citadel hidden deep within the deserts of Kibkibirin. It is said to hold the greatest and most dangerous magical secrets and treasures in the known world. Treasures which, to this day, are highly sought after by would-be adventurers. The Sirod often encouraged marriage and neutrality among their ranks to strengthen the magic within and secure Sarradon from unbridled magic use without. Over the course of the War in Heaven, they had grown increasingly divorced, though they would occasionally employ a cult within their ranks, the Amus Farundal, to quietly spy on or execute dissidents within and without their organization. Today, many scholars attribute the cult's failures in repairing the growing schism of the Sirod as the catalyst to the latter's destruction, when the unspoken neutrality of the cult ended and broke along Wardenite and ritualist lines, pushing the Sirod to its cataclysmic end. Regardless of that suggestion, ritualists and Wardenite sympathies overcame precedents, and the two faiths splintered within the Sirod, becoming the Curati and the Almadi cabals. It is somewhere in this fracture that the discovery of self-replicating blood magic was made, or perhaps its rediscovery. It is unclear if the power was once known to the Sirod and kept safe within their many protected vaults, or if by studying the Blood Blight they made the discovery. Some have also suggested, by way of ancient notes, that individuals within the Azmufarundal sought to use this magic, coupled with their own blood, to reach a higher spiritual plane, or to transcend mortality itself. The truth is, of course, lost to us. Self-replicating blood magic is believed to be the most dangerous magic in all of Eris. Its ritual is complicated and castable only by the most skilled and powerful, often requiring groups of magi to perform. In 802 IS, as the two cabals prepared such magic aiming to bring a swift conclusion to the war in heaven, they had no way of knowing that their simultaneous casting would destroy the Sirod and kill 80% of all magi in Sarradon in an instant, as their blood and bodies exploded in pillars of flame, spreading to any and all magic users and anyone who happened to be nearby. In an instant, millions died, and though the ritualists suffered worse than the Wardenites, neither could consider it a victory in the slightest. Today, this event is known as the Decimation of Sidon, or the Halakdun, and ushered in a century of turmoil, war, and chaos across the region, a period aptly called the Downfall. In the east of Sarradon, the Wardenite Eastern Mamur al-Hudi and nearly every living member of his family were killed in an instant, suggesting political motivations within at least the ritualist cabal. All died, save for Princess Zenid, poet, orator, and general of equal skill. Zenid rallied the armies of her father's broken Mamuramat to defend against the many incursions and attacks threatening its borders from ritualist and prospective warlords alike. Yet the odds were too great, and at the Battle of Azarek, Zenid was defeated and forced into exile as the eastern Mamuramat crumbled and splintered between its conquerors. Zenid then braved the deserts and the mountain passes, an arduous and dangerous journey, eventually finding her way to the court of the newly crowned central Mamur, Tathtali, in 810 IS. A tremendously important man for whom the modern branch of Wardenism, Tali Era, is now named. The central Mamuramat had long been rivals with the eastern, as the descendants of the first Warden's Mamurs grew increasingly hostile with one another, following his and his successors' deaths. We've talked about the first Warden in a previous video, so if you need context on who that is, I suggest watching that. The latter Mamurs would eventually vie for total control over the faithful in their respective regions. Before the downfall, Tathtali's father, Mamur Yusar, was a powerful magi and ended up being one of the few to actually survive the Halakdun. Yet, he was driven mad by the exposure sickness it wrought. Tathtali, seeing the madness within his father and the need for strong rule amidst the present devastation, began a civil war to depose him, and in 809 IS slew his father to be crowned Central Mamur. When Zenid met with Tathtali, she leveraged her title of Eastern Mamuramat for Tathtali's aid, as she was the sole true inheritor of it. Taken by her, Tathtali agreed, uniting the Mamuramat forever, and the two sealed their alliance with marriage. Thereafter, Zenid immediately set, with the aid of her famed general Ishtabima Mamura, on planning their campaigns to reconquer the eastern Mamuramat, as well as other lands lost as a result of the Halakdun. Yet it was not meant to be, for the demands of their home region required most of their military focus, and in the end, only a few eastern border territories were reclaimed. Still, despite this seeming failure, Tathtali and Zenid were by all accounts capable and effective rulers. However, the ideal of their mutual co-rule is often overblown by modern Tathtalites, who remember the reign as a harmonious fairy tale and a peaceful joining of their two great houses, when, in actuality, it was quite contentious, as Tathtali and Zenid's courts struggled to integrate with each other. In fact, it was initially proposed that the courts would run parallel administrations, and that Zenid's mamur would be passed to the firstborn daughter of her and Tathtali, and that their son would inherit Tathtali's mamur. But, having lost most of her armies and her wealth in her exile, Zenid was denied such notions, and in reality played a much more junior role in the partnership, relegated to mostly administering the court and palace, while Tathtali fielded the armies and led the mamurship. By the time of Zenid's death, Tathtali had largely ruled the mamur alone for almost a decade. Regardless, their idyllic, if fictitious co-rule is often the subject of both historical and artistic appreciation, and serves as convenient propaganda, if nothing else. Over the course of his 56-year reign, Tathtali would reforge the position of mamur into one that did not share power, but instead ruled the Wardenite people as absolute and sacred monarch, though this would not be fully realized until the rule of his son, Uthman. The cost and scope of such an endeavor would ultimately lead to future mamurs selling Sardonian land to marchers and Avrasarians to replenish their wealth, though this is not the whole truth, as there was also a great civil war between brothers, which effectively bankrupted the region and caused this to happen. Wardenite scholars mark the period between 809 IS to 874 IS, or the beginning of Tathtali's reign to the end of his heir Uthman's reign, as the Age of Tathtali, a period marked by the ending of the downfall, the unification of the Mamuramat, and the separation of Tabaquai traditionalists and new unified Mamur supporters, the Abajarmiya, who worked to codify and expand the legal authority of the new position. The Abajarmiya, under the patronage of the new singular Mamur, would actively work to spread their new Tathtalite beliefs across the Wardenite world for almost 3 centuries, hence why it remains the largest Wardenite sect today. Zenid died in 832 IS, with Tathtali surviving over 30 years more, dying in 865 IS. Today, regardless of the truth of their rule, both are remembered fondly, although some dissenting Wardenite sects like the Arari, who formed following the union of Tathtali and Zenid in opposition to them, would of course say otherwise. Tathtali is seen as the second founder, so to speak, of the Wardenite faith, as his and Zenid's administration and cultural programs are largely the same as those seen today within Wardenite society. Their rule marked a major shift in the faith of the first Warden centuries before. For though they ruled in a period of great strife and uncertainty, it was by their and their heirs' hands that the Wardenites, and in reality Sarradon as a whole, was able to recover from the devastation of the Halakdun. In the year 899 IS, the Mamuramat watched with bated breath as 9-year-old Yousef ibn Ansir began his 11-year regency under the care of eunuch Al-Thuthbi. But despite public fears of civil war or youthful folly, Yousef and Al-Thuthbi exceeded expectations, and at the age of 20, the minimum age in Wardenite law when someone may hold the title of Mamur, Ansir rose to become the 4th Tathtalite Mamur at the center. Though he is remembered as both an exceedingly competent ruler and bringer of cultural and economic renaissance within the realm, his children would not fare so well, and for this he is chiefly to blame. For rather than select his eldest child as his successor, as had been the precedent, Yousef announced his plan to divide the Mamuramat between his 3 sons, Asaid, Mukim, and Quaim. While some scholars speculate this may have been done to return the Mamuramat to its original state, divided between several Mamurs, it sparked a devastating civil war between the 3, less than a decade after Yousef's death in 956 IS. However, before we jump to Asaid and his brothers, we must also discuss a man named Abdar Sarhadin, also called the God-Render, a Wardenite warlord who would conquer much of the former eastern Mamuramat in the time of Yousef, and would, in time, come to challenge the Mamuramat itself for ownership of the eastern Mamuramat title. When Asaid succeeded his father's central realm, it was a stable land with a full treasury, strong armies, and with plans to secure a final Wardenite victory in the war in heaven, all seemed well. How much of Asaid's doing is to blame for losing all 3 of these things, or rather 4 of these things, is up to debate, and historical records of the time varied greatly between his brother's chroniclers and his own, with the former saying he was a womanizing spendthrift, and the latter saying he was mostly in the wrong place at the wrong time. Regardless, the childhood rivalry that existed between Asaid and his brother Mukim only deepened when they and their brother Quaim were forced to co-rule. This ignited into an all-out war in 961 IS, when Asaid sent his minister Al-Baraqui with an army to arrest Mukim and seize his land, prompting Quaim, who preferred Mukim to his brother Asaid, to rally his own forces to Mukim's defense. For 5 years the brothers fought, until Asaid was captured and executed by order of Mukim, who accepted and ascended to the Mamuramat throne over his brother's bleeding corpse. Mukim took the throne of a now bankrupt realm, the Fratricidal War having drained most of the Mamuramat's treasury and destabilized its administration. To make matters worse, Abdar severed all ties with the Mamur, claiming Mukim's seizure of power and slaying of his brother was illegal, and therefore his administration false, which is technically true. Abdar then formally assumed ownership and control of the Mamuramat of the East by principle of acclaim, essentially a contingency in Wardenite law that should the Mamur and their heirs happen to die in a battle, a Wardenite soldier of acclaim could claim the Mamur for themselves. In this case, Abdar was claiming it for himself. But this rebellion would be short-lived, as Mukim, much like his grandfather, was a competent ruler and is generally cited as the reason Abdar was assassinated in 978 IS. According to Poets' Tales funded by Mukim himself anyway. Mukim was also the first to begin leasing lands to Marcher and Adversarian rulers in order to recover the floundering treasury, an act which his successors would continue to dire consequences. Regardless, Mukim spent much of his rule wrestling with the court, who continued to weigh the ramification of Said's death at Mukim's hand. Though he would win on loose legalities based around the expediency doctrine, claiming Said was functionally insane and a crypto-ritualist, and therefore drastic measures for the good of the realm and the faith had to be taken, this precedence would come to haunt his successors as coups and rebellions became more and more common. In the end, Mukim was assassinated in 979 IS by Abdar sympathizer using a poisoned blade, and was replaced by his brother Quaim, first as regent to Mukim's son, then 3 years old, but soon as Mamur in his own right. In contrast to his two brothers, Quaim was a quiet and contemplative man, and for 22 years ruled the Mamurmat in a period of calm and peace. Like his brother, Quaim would continue leasing land to the Marcher and Adversarian rulers, which eventually culminated in the arrival of the Agionists in the beginning of the Saints' War, which we'll touch on shortly. On account of his temperance, or because he had no interest in them, he took no wife and produced no heirs, the realm going to his brother Mukim's only son, Mudarshid, who he raised as his own. Mudarshid, for his part, would largely ignore the realm and became increasingly interested in magic, causing him to call many Adversarian magi to his court, whom he gave many positions of high authority within the court itself. The realm was left to the rule of a Marcher minister named Luzo, who Mudarshid favored. Mudarshid would die in a magical experiment in 1049 IS and was succeeded by his son, Mustasin. Mustasin, upon taking the throne, had Luzo, the Marcher guy, executed and appointed his own favorite, a eunuch named Ralat ad-Dawar, as chief minister of the realm, who, much as his predecessor had done, was left to rule as Mustasin attempted to restore the Sirod of old. We talked about them in the last Wardenite episode, if you recall, seeking to both revive the Magi cast to Sarradon and because of his slight distrust of foreign Magi in his court. He spent so much time absorbed in this effort, however, that he essentially didn't do anything with the realm at all, and was succeeded by his son Radi in a bloodless coup in 1090 IS, and placed on house arrest where he would remain for the rest of his days, slowly going insane until he died at around the age of 80. With grandfather and father both marrying foreign Magi women to strengthen the latent magic within their bloodlines, Radi emerged as one of the most powerful Magi of his generation, and began his reign by purging the Adversarian Magi from his court with the claim they favored his brother Zaid and wished to overthrow him. Although this appears to be dubious according to historical accounts, as many of the Magi looked at Radi favorably, and it was more likely a convenient excuse for him to rid himself of potential threats. With his skill in the art of blood magic, Radi would live for over a century, with some speculating he likely dabbled in death magic in an attempt to become a lich, though this was never proven. Likewise, with his cold, insatiable desire for knowledge, he experimented endlessly on his children in an attempt to purify their bloodline, to disastrous consequences, as his sons Muzaffar, Yousef, Radi, another Radi, and Ithtar all died by accident, old age, or paranoia on Radi's own part. When the Saints' War began in 1141 IS as a result of repeated Agionist territorial aggressions in the region, initially against the Ritualists, Radi's non-Magi Adversarian advisors believed the Agionists to be allies based on their understanding of the former saints like Decanos, who preached for the rule of law much like the Wardenites. Therefore, Radi worked tirelessly to give more and more land, including the island where the Forgotten Saint cult exists now, to the Agionists as a sign of friendship and well wishes. This was in part because the Agionists were primarily attacking ritualists, and Radi saw it as a way to legitimize his rule, sort of a, look, see, they're doing this for me. And it worked, if only for a time. However, a year after his death in 1180, Radi's blunder would become all too apparent as the Agionists moved to take lands not previously promised to them, betraying their Wardenite alliances and pitting the two in a battle over Sarradon ever since. Today we see the culmination of that betrayal in the efforts of one man, Harthah ibn Sarradon, at righting the blunders of the past by ridding Sarradon of these Adversarian interlopers forever. But his success, as all things in this world, depend on you and your actions in the days to come. I want to thank Mayor from the Godherja dev team for helping me write this script, for getting me so much of this information. Your support is invaluable. They also helped me do the first Warden video, so give them a shout out, applause if you can. If you like this sort of content, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. It lets me and YouTube know that you like this sort of content, you'd like to see more of it. If you want to support the channel, you can consider becoming a channel member. We have 2 tiers. We have Squires and Knights. I want to thank everybody who's already become a member and anybody who decides to join. I appreciate you very much. As always, I'm Sol, and I will happily see you in the next one.